discovery was presented to the entire university systems in Nigeria. And so Gagut, the discovery, was presented to the whole world in that setting. The goal was to expose Gagut to scrutiny. Let the experts scrutinize it, okay, and let them reach a conclusion.
Who were some of the experts who scrutinized?
Well, some of the experts are every mathematician in the international community that wanted to be there, that wished to be there, could have been there. Okay? Professors from Cambridge, from Harvard, from MIT, from Tokyo, from Japan, from Germany, Göttingen, from Moscow State, all of those were supposed to be there. I mean, were invited to be there. And so these people then were to say their piece in terms of listen to Gagut critically and, draw their conclusions in terms of coming up with a verdict. That's the ultimate. You can't do much better than that. To go and actually expose a discovery, in an uninhibited way, in terms of say, well, hey, here it is. Let me hear what you said, that kind of thing, and go out to actually be in front of the experts. That's what was happening. So now after that, if it was shut down, then of course you couldn't. The rest points were mute.
I would estimate there were 8 lectures given.
There were 18 lectures given.
18 lectures.
Yes, because there were 7 locations for lectures.
Okay, let's take this. 7 locations.
Yes.
I know I counted on an average of at least 50 professors, heads of departments in the science and physics area at each of those lectures, at least 50, because you drew them from every university.
Yes.
That would say approximately, just from 7 lectures, that you had a mere 400 of the top scientists in Nigeria. Would you agree with that? Yes.
Like I said, there were 7 locations, like you said, but each location has at least 2 lectures, which is how we get the 18 lectures from, okay? And naturally, most people that came for the first day stay for the second day and so on and so forth. Yes, there were a lot of academics, a lot of researchers, a lot of professors, because it's the hottest topic. So you didn't expect that a lecture of that kind would be presented without people being interested in it, okay? And that's what happened. They showed up, one, skeptical at first, but once they presented, they soon came to terms with the realities of Gagut, which is that it is correct, it's a sound theorem, not a theory, that explains everything. I remembered actually posing a question to the audience after presented Gagut, Gij, J equals 0, and I asked the audience, after explaining what the equation meant, and asked if there was one person that disagreed with the Gij, J equal to 0, to raise their hand up. And and the pictures is there to show that I confirm that there was not a single hand raised. Shortly thereafter, another meeting was convened to actually deliberate on, on Gagut in terms of, so now that nobody can argue with Gagut, at least within that audience, the first lecture was attended by almost all the university presidents in Nigeria. Okay, almost all of them. And all the noted professors, professors in the sciences and social sciences and everything else, and mathematics, were all there. For example, there was a former Minister of Education, Professor Jibril Aminu was there, even though he's not a mathematician, he's a professor of medicine, and has been instrumental, while as a university president himself in Nigeria, had awarded a degree, an honorary degree, to a Nobel laureate in physics called Professor Chandrasekhar. Was awarded. He was, in fact, he was president of the university that awarded that degree to Professor Chandrasekhar. So he was there in the audience. In fact, a presentation that was done at his committee, because he's now a senator, is the chair of the Senate Committee, the Nigerian Senate Committee on Foreign Affairs. When we gave him a presentation, he was so thrilled by the presentation that he ordered for 11 sets of Gagut books, which is like 22 books altogether. And so there were those kinds, of course, the president of, or rather the executive secretary of the University Commission was also there, you know, and the Professor Dedikwe, you know, who is the former university president and currently in charge of the program called NEETS, the Nigerian experts and academics in the diaspora program, you know, was there. Or anybody, Professor Suji, a distinguished scientist himself and current Minister of Education, was there in the audience, and he had some great things to say about Gagut previously. So it was anybody that was anybody, especially within Nigeria and the immediate countries, you know, within Africa, were there. So they were invited, and members of the international community were there. They were international community members, you know, that were there in the audience. Okay, we don't, you know, except for the Canadian ambassador to Nigeria, who was there, and the United Nations head of the UNESCO, who was also there. I mean, you know, so it was very international in that respect. Another person that was present is, you know, Alex Animalu, okay, who again has a background, was trained in Cambridge University. Degrees from Cambridge University, research in Cambridge University, has a classic, a research classic in Cambridge University, where he wrote a paper, his doctoral thesis in effect, you know, has been cited as one of the most cited papers to come out of Cambridge's Cavendish laboratory for, you know, since 1930s. His paper has been cited, you know, from what we hear, 729 times, which makes his paper a classic from Cambridge, a citation classic. Now, not only did he make it to the top 12 of that classic, but his paper is number 1. Now, 4 of his colleagues who made it to that 12 top papers list have been awarded Nobel Prizes in physics, 4 of them. But his paper is number 1. His paper is not number 2. You know, at least at the time we looked at it, it was number 1. So that's the kind of guy who was in the audience as well, who himself had earlier reviewed Gagut and verified Gagut and saw that Gagut is correct.
I was always able to derive his result from physical insight and geometry. So this is what satisfied me. I've tried to derive, use gauge theory, and use theory of, you know, quantum field theory to derive some of his major conclusions. But of course, these are sophisticated mathematics, and there's just that. If you look at the review that I've written, which I've given you a copy, then you'll be able to see what I'm talking about. I also know about this demonstration, which I've been carrying about all these years, of going. The important point was he has a methodology for going beyond Einstein. And that the methodology he used was not empty, in that he did actually find solutions of the field equation. I've shown that in my review.
Yes. Are you saying that there is a unification?
Of course.
So some people need to hear it directly. You know?
You want me to say, I've said so, that there is a unification.
So Abubakar, a person with an undergraduate degree in mathematics from Caltech, California Institute of Technology, recognized as top 5 universities in the world. And then also the same person, Professor Abubakar, also has a PhD from Cambridge University in England. Again, another top 3 university school in mathematics. And he himself has actually done some very fine work on wave theory, the mathematics of wave theory, while in Cambridge, and has published some seminal papers on the topic. And so he was in the audience. Now, it takes a lot of guts to take a new discovery before such people. And after listening to that presentation, he was interviewed by the news media, particularly the National Television Authority in Nigeria. And when he came out and he was interviewed, the first question is, well, what do you think of this discovery specifically? What do you think of the Gij, j equals 0? And he went on and he says that the equation is perfectly correct. That's almost, if I remember that exactly, almost exact words. It is equation, Gagut equation Gij, j equals 0 is perfectly correct. And he also said that, yes, you could actually interpret it as a change in God is 0, as in God was the same yesterday, today, and forever, as is already known to believers. So he confirmed that as well. Then he went on further to say that the mere fact that a legendary, or some legendary mathematicians have reviewed it, like Gregory Sagas, who has been known to have made about 205 contributions, significant contributions in mathematics, topping the list of all mathematicians that I know. He says the mere fact that that guy reviewed Gagut and had no problem with it automatically confirms what he has said, that Gagut is perfectly correct, not approximately correct, but perfectly correct. Those are his words. And given that he holds the finest paper qualification in mathematics,
He holds the finest what?
the finest paper qualifications in mathematics, which is a degree, a PhD degree from Cambridge University, that summarizes, everything else. For you to go against that kind of conclusion, you have to have a lot of guts.
Distinguished Senator, I know you to be a world authority in mathematics. Have you seen the publications, listened to the lecture? What is your view on it? How correct mathematically is it? And his assumptions and his the mathematical symbols he used and what they denote, and literally Gij, J, all that really come to 0.
Yes. When you have something like Gij, J coming to 0, it means that it's constant. Because if you differentiate a constant, you get 0. So that's the basic of it. And that is why he's saying that it even describes God in a way, because God doesn't change. So the change in God is 0, so God doesn't change. So mathematically it's perfectly all right. And as I said earlier on, the mere fact that it has been reviewed by world-renowned mathematical physicists shows that mathematically it's correct. And so we can rely on it.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah, thank you.
and what that will be found on his Newton, Gagut, Marx, just a few names. Stephen Hawking is one that you probably familiar with, the one that is sitting on the Newton chair in Cambridge, California. But his experience with this search was so overwhelming and frustrating to him that
he made action of everything. The stars, the planets, the earth, and so on. That the earth has not been hit by any other body for so many years. There is such a law. And he predicted that if you have such a law with electricity, with magnetism, with gravity, with weak force, with strong force, it's equal to solution. But Einstein was not able to put in a concrete mathematical formula whether I is equal to AB squared or something that explains it. Professor Gagut Oyibo has done that. In fact, he's nominated 3 times for a Nobel Award. We believe one day he will make it there. And then this country will give him a prestigious national honor. So I'm waiting for that one to materialize. So for us, it's a pleasure. One of our graduates, a Nigerian, hailing from Kogi State and from ABU, an African, he has developed such expertise which has been recognized and accepted by the most advanced of nations. President of America, the American Union, and Republic of Russia. And that the university, through the Vice Chancellor, is arranged for this interactive session whereby experts who are familiar in the profession will be able to interact with the august, knowledgeable, experienced, well-known, renowned scholar, Professor Audu Gabriel Oyibo.
Well, praise God. The only force in the universe, which is what this whole thing is about. The whole thing is about the search for the Almighty God. See, what's interesting, which is what I want to get it out immediately, is that, see, the basic question is, what is God? And for those who don't believe in God, immediately, the question is, what is the universe? You can't, you have to be either in that group, And so, basic answers to that question over the existence of humanity can be characterized in 3 categories. The holy books, which is the Bible, Quran, Torah, said that the universe came out of the Word of God. As in God saying, let there be light, and the Word changing into light. And God saying, let there be stone, and the Word changing into stone. And God saying, let there be humans, the Word changing into humans. That's the position of the believers. Now, the non-believers or the scientists say, well, we don't believe in that God thing because we don't believe in God. But Gagut will later on prove that they do believe in God. But they said the universe came out of a big explosion that they call the Big Bang. And yet there's a third one by the ancient Africans, which predates the 2 accounts that we gave by about 20,000 years. The ancient Africans concluded that the universe came out of the roaring water waves of noon. The roaring water waves of noon. And out of those waves came a building block called atom, which was later on mispronounced atom by the Greeks, and which was further mispronounced to Adam or Adamu at the time of the writing of the holy books. So atom is the same word as atom, and the name Adam, the name given to the first human, is the same word. What this discovery has done, by the way, the three accounts that we just gave has been the basis of human persecution since humanity. Because everybody thought that that was a different view. Okay? Certainly the atheists and scientists and loggerheads were the believers. Okay? And the ancients and so on and so forth. But Gagut was able to, through a mathematical process, actually unify these three accounts by concluding mathematically that what the believers call the Word of God is actually what the scientists call the Big Bang. The Word of God is the Big Bang. And it sounded like the roaring water waves of none. So the three sides are talking the same thing. And so all those lives that have been decimated as a result of thinking that all those accounts are different were just destroyed for no reason. Everybody is saying the same thing. Because Gagut determines that there's a common denominator in those three accounts. That common denominator mathematically is waves. The Word of God is sound wave. The Big Bang is a big sound wave, and the roaring water waves is already waves. As a matter of fact, somewhere in the holy books, particularly the Bible, Genesis, it is stated in the beginning, chapter 1, verses 1 to 3. You will read that. It says, God created the heavens and earth in the beginning, and the earth was desolate, and darkness prevailed in the deep, and that the Spirit of God was upon the waters. The Spirit of God was upon the waters. Now, what do you see upon the waters normally? When you look at waters, like the ocean, what do you see on the face of the waters? It is waves. That means that the essence of the Spirit of God is waves, which explains, which is consistent with the discovery, saying that, yes, God first existed in waves, and it is a concentration of that wave, which is the essence of the Almighty God, that matter comes out of, which is consistent with the ancient African account that says atom comes out of that wave. A scientist within the last 100 years, a physicist, was able to prove that the electron is nothing but a standing wave. That means you have a wave that goes this way and another that goes that way, and a reinforcement part is what you call the standing wave, and that is the essence of an electron. So that means that matter is simply a concentration of waves, okay? Which also says that matter comes out of waves, and that wave is actually the Almighty God, which is why you don't see God, but exists in wave. And the thinner the wave, the more powerful it is. And there is so much from that point on that becomes really clear. For example, the believers believe that God is everywhere. Of course, you've got to believe that God is everywhere. But how could God be everywhere? Especially if the picture of God is that of a human that is contained within a boundary. How could you be everywhere if you're contained within a finite boundary? Well, God is everywhere, much like the sun can be everywhere, kind of. When the light waves starts from the sun, it gets here approximately 7 minutes. That's because the speed is very fast. It gets here, that's 93 million miles in 7 minutes. So if you can imagine the waves representing the Almighty God as being about a zillion times faster than that of light waves, then you can imagine how God can be everywhere instantaneously. And that's the way God is. Well, about the concept of God. Well, those days, you humans came out of their shelters and they looked at the skies, what did they see? They saw stars, particularly the sun, like a balloon. But they saw this heavy object sitting down there without a visible support. But their experience as humans says that you have to be supported in order to be able to stay stable. You stand on Mother Earth in order to be stable. And if you try to jump up, you will find that you cannot stay up for any length of time. So it was surprising to them that such a massive object could be sitting out there without a visible means of support. So they concluded that there must be a support there, an invisible support that is able to hold them up there. That invisible support is what they define as God. So the support that is holding the sun is called the sun God. The one that holds the moon is called the moon God. The one that holds Mercury is called the Mercury God. So the African ancestor called Baba Akhenaten came around and said, gee, if there are these individual gods out there, they must have a grandfather or a grandmother. And that grandmother or grandfather is what you call the Almighty God. And so he basically unified all the gods. The search for the unified field theory is basically an attempt to refine what Baba Akhenaten has done. But the scientists will not admit that to you. And that's why I feel great that I'm here today to tell you that that is the story. Because what Akhenaten called God is what the scientists call gravity today. It is gravity that keeps the planets and the stars hanging out there. That's what Akhenaten called God. So, later on, Maxwell would discover another kind of force called electromagnetic. So, that's an additional God. And the strong and the weak were discovered. These are individual gods, grandfather of those gods or forces. And that's what we were blessed to find. Basically, what we found, which is the way the problem was posed, you were supposed to find a simple formula that basically either represents the essence of God or is able to explain everything in the universe. And what we found was this equation. Otherwise called God Almighty's Grand Unified Theorem. God, thank you. God. That's what we found. Gij, comma j equals 0. Most of you who are into mathematics realize that that's a tensor equation. But the essence of that is basically that the believers see this as God. If you like, G-O-D, the grandfather or grandmother of all the gods. The non-believers see this as the force, okay, that produces power that runs the universe. Okay, they see power in Gij. And so God looks at this and says, gee, the essence of God is power. That's why the word might is used to describe God. Almighty. If you take the word almighty away from God, God doesn't mean anything anymore. Therefore, it is clear then that say. The believers and non-believers believe in the same God. They just called it by different names. And this has been a basis of interhuman persecution since the beginning of time. The fact that the believers are angry at the non-believers that they don't believe in God, and therefore ungrateful for the entity that created them. And that the non-believers think the believers are dumb heads. You know, that they happen to believe in some cloning stuff. In reality, they all believe in the same God. That simply says that not only is it true that there are no atheists in a foxhole, but there's simply no atheist at all or anywhere. That is garden. And what this means is the equation, the comma in your tensor basically represents change, an indication of change. So the equation can be read. The change in God is 0. Every believer knows that God was the same yesterday, today, and forever. No change in God. Therefore, this satisfies the believer's belief. But you know something? If there's a choice between faith and a theorem, the theorem is superior. Absolutely correct. The only reason we deal with faith is because there's no theorem. If you have a theorem, that's far superior to faith. Faith is like, if you have a well-presented Harvard professor, by the way, Harvard is supposed to be the best university in the world currently by Financial Times of London. If you found a male professor from Harvard and he comes around and you ask him 2 + 1 and it says 5 because of his credentials, you're going to develop a faith. So that is faith. That's faith. You're going to be misled on that faith until you're able to get a Messiah that comes to relieve you of that problem. On the other hand, a theorem about this is, what's the definition of a plus? A plus says, if you're adding 2 numbers, it says, count one on one hand, and count the other on the other hand. And addition says, count them together. That's the definition of a plus. So, in this case, you're going to count 1, 2, and then you're going to count 1 on the other. Now you're going to count them together. 1, 2, 3. That is a theorem. And the answer is 3. This leaves no doubt in your minds that you're correct. That's constitutes a proof, a mathematical proof, and it is a theorem. So if you have this, in terms of saying the answer is 3, that is far superior than your 5 that is based on your belief in the credentials of the professor. Because it's overwhelming and intimidating. You say you must be right. That is faith. So it is that differentiates this. This is a theorem. And it therefore proves the existence of the Almighty God. And from now till eternity, no one will have the guts to say that God is questionable anymore. Albert Einstein was looking for this equation, this one, and what he got was E is equal to mc squared. Most of you are familiar with it. He was looking for this equation. And you know what a God actually came from here. How? You got to remember what the circumstances were. In a nuclear reaction, mass seems to be disappearing. Okay? Mass will disappear, but they will get energy as a result. Okay? So you can rewrite this equation by mc squared minus t equals 0. So mass was the beginning, like your 1,000 naira. That was what you had, the mass. In the end, you got this. So the end, away from the beginning, is 0. But this equation actually came from here. So let's say a Göttingen professor, that's the Harvard of Germany, comes around and says, well, this is wrong. What does that say? This is also wrong. What does that mean? You're going to strip Albert Einstein of all his glory. How many people do you think have the guts to do that? All right. So, God is a mover and a shaker. Okay? Now, would God play dice? God says, no. And thanks to Professor, the Dean, he has already helped me with that. But this is a big problem. Okay? God is a mover and a shaker. When he moves you, this is the path that you're going to be following.
It's not black magic.
That's right. This is the age of black magic, ladies and gentlemen. This is the equation, and all mathematics equations all come from here. Did I say some of them? All, as in A-L-L in caps. If you don't believe it, just try me with one. Therefore, all that you study is embedded in there. Now, God is the mover and the shaker. When God moves or shakes you, you're going to go on this path. You're going to be on this path. The question, in terms of trying to go through the dynamics, in terms of what is the universe? Well, the universe that is the question that's supposed to be answered. What has happened over the years of humanity trying to acquire knowledge is, people get a concentration of a part of the universe that intrigues them immediately. Okay? For example, Newton will come around and say, well, the stars are beautiful. Okay? The planets and their motions. Okay? Hey, I want to look at this. So he comes up and says, well, gravity, okay, gravitational force, okay, would be M1, M2, G over R squared. The force between two objects, okay, is the product of their masses times a constant over the distance squared. Okay? Now, nobody knew where he got this equation from. So remember, he was an alchemist. He did it the old-fashioned way. It was through the African science. He said an apple fell on his head, and what he got was this. And it turned out to be right. A good approximation. Okay, so we got a sense of that, but he was concentrating on the massive objects in the universe. Maxwell comes around and concentrated on the smaller components of the universe, tiny things like charges. And he was able to come up with a formula. And yet, the modern day scientists, people who deal with cosmology, by and large, use relativity equations. Relativity equation. In reality, relativity in reality, relativity can be said to be, this is what relativity actually does. Which is a very special solution or set to this equation here. This is what relativity does. So therefore, it is limited, very, very limited. Now, they also went through Riemannian geometry, Riemann. The Riemann geometry is very fine geometry. As a matter of fact, I got to learn that Riemann's thesis was supervised by Friedrich Gauss in Göttingen. And so that makes, Gauss the grandfather of relativity in some ways. Beautiful. But what is Riemann doing? Relate two coordinate systems, or more than one geometric systems, where they have a constraint in terms of going from one space to the other. And that constraint is the S squared actually they don't add this dot actually with the T and so on, CDT and so on. And they're putting a constraint on this here. What that does is you're starting from a fundamental solution of your problem that you want to formulate. Because in reality, this is the R squared, which is basically eta sub 1, a section of eta sub 1. And as long as this constraint remains in your functional analysis, the solution is embedded, at least one characteristic set of solutions are embedded in your formulation. This is what most mathematicians and physicists don't pay attention to. They get caught up with the tensor analysis that they don't see the role of, this is where you get the metrics from, this thing here. This is what produces the metric tensors. But geometrically, that's in a local circle or sphere or whatever, okay? Which is a characteristic solution to the problem. Because the motions on the gravity, the planets all go around this here. So it's almost like starting to formulate and you embedded in your process the solution. The solution is hidden here. A characteristic is hidden in the analysis. So therefore, when after you got the equations, and you come up and you reproduce the answer again, hey, it's expected. There's nothing wrong there because the answer has been buried in the solution all the time. So, having said that, this in the relativity analysis then constrains the Gagut equation to one characteristic, which is eta sub 1. The general solution of Gagut will be G0 eta sub 0, and in fact, at eta sub 0 you can go in another dimension, you can add all the eta sub 0s, which are the waves, because they're linear equations, you can superpose them. Then plus G1 eta sub 1 plus G2 eta sub 2 And it goes on. Each of these characteristics define the characteristics of the universe. And so when you constrain your solution process to just one set of characteristics, you are highly limited. And as the characteristics approaches the singular point, which is, say 0, okay? If you keep on going and the radius, is getting to 0, then you force into a singularity because that's all you have. But in a broad solution, if that approaches 0, you're still left with S. And in reality, what Hawking was doing, and there was a point where he was actually very, very excited and he thought he should have won a Nobel Prize, was that he took this and tried to use a quantum argument to add a part of this. And he was able to explain some things. Now, and he jumped up and said, yeah, I should. They're celebrating in Cambridge all over the place. But he's just patching equations. In his analysis, this came from relativity. This came from somewhere, the quantum theory. They didn't come from a common origin. Gagut, on the other hand, pulls them out together. That is the main difference. So as this approaches its limit, you still have this and this other things that were, in other words, where the gravity disappears, you can still explain the quantum part. Or that the energies that is transferred from the gravity, as it diminishes, goes into the quantum. And that's basically what he was trying to do, and that's interpretability. So that is about Hawking. In other words, if you separate it, like I said before, D'Alembert's, the wave equation, given which solution comes from D'Alembert, okay, is, a Saddam's solution, mathematical physics equation, okay, and when you have Schrodinger, it's a different equation, okay, and you get a particular set of waves there, and so on and so forth. But with this, if you put this through the wave equation, it satisfies it exactly, approximately. And if you put this through the Schrodinger's equation, it also satisfies it exactly. So it satisfies all the possible wave equations that there are. Okay? So it can explain all those phenomena, but it's just one equation. Okay? That is the beauty of Gagut in terms of it swallowing everything else that exists. Okay? Now, so we can explain cosmology because all the features of characteristics are here, because there are infinite number of them. We haven't even begun to see what was known was discrete values, 0 and 1. What about fractional values? Nobody has examined that yet. Okay? That is there to be explored. It's all buried in here. So that is why this is so complete, okay, in terms of geometry. Now, so that is the problem with Hawking, is that he has one kind of characteristics through relativity. Okay, there are other kinds of characteristics. Okay. I want to be sure I heard.
Well, I appreciated the connectivity you have established between equations and the concept of God. Fine. But what I wanted to know, is there any mathematical equation which can describe God? It has been understood by philosophers and scientists and philosophy of science people that no mathematical equation can completely capture the concept of Almighty. Fine. As Cantor I cited in 1900, end of that, he proved that there are various kinds of infinities. There is one absolute infinity which matches God if you want to explain God, and that cannot be treated mathematically. That's the thing I wanted to ask. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. That's a fellow mathematician, so we speak the same language. And it's true that the infinities are a problem. Okay, they're a problem in mathematics. What I think Gagut has done was to transform infinity in a way that you can work with it. Yes, you can work with it.
Sorry, sir.
Yes.
Countable infinity. In that sense, countable infinity.
Yes.
That has been the base for all these equations.
Yes.
But
Well,
not the otherwise.
yeah, well, see, in other words, okay, it all begins with the following statement. What is the universe? The universe is a large space. Large is relative. See, you know, there are all kinds of things that are coming as a result of that problem of infinity. Okay, for example, the whole concept of expanding universe. When I explain it to an average person sitting down here, they can see clearly that there's no such a thing as an expanding universe. Okay? So it's all ears. Let me tell you why. You said, and that is Newton, the big guys now. I mean, talking about Einstein, he died. Talking about, I mean, Caltech has been studying heavily, expanding it. You understand? All right. You want to talk about the expansion. First of all, you talk about the boundary. Okay? So let's say this is where your boundary is. And now you say that it is expanding.
Indefinitely.
Yeah. So what do you call this place that it is expanding to?
This is the steps which these equations deal with, that it will be countable infinity only. It goes to infinity, but the steps are countable. Countable means isomorphic to set of natural numbers.
Right. Well, the bottom line, though, is you must have a definition for an instantaneous space that is left out here that this is expanding to. What would you call that?
It's part of the universe.
Absolutely. Therefore, there isn't such a thing as an expanding universe in reality. Now, I know. The concept of expanding universe came from eta sub 1. It came from eta sub 1, which has no regards for these other ones, okay? And when you look at the characteristics of eta sub 1, yeah, you can have expanding radii of the characteristics and so on and so forth, but not the totality of the universe. The universe can't expand. Where is it expanding to?
Because it is the limit.
See, therefore I said that the concept of God Almighty has been taken as absolute infinity,
Yes.
which cannot come here, because that cannot be treated mathematically.
No.
All other equations and things are dealing with countable infinity.
Yes. Well, no. Well, see, all right, but this does not lend itself to what you said. Okay? No. This already says it's a large space. That does not leave out any portion of that space. Out of God's, by definition, is got to be infinite. See, because
Absolute infinity.
absolute. It's got to be. Yes,
But
absolute.
not this infinity. This infinity is countable.
No. This equation is valid in the absolute infinity. That's what I'm saying. It's valid.
I don't know.
No. You know what? Listen. Let me tell you the dynamics. Yeah, that's what it's supposed to be. You need to see two mathematicians argue with each other. That is awesome. What? The question is, what is the universe? The universe is a large space. Okay. That is full of motion. He didn't say that it has to be finite. That's number one. If you pick a point anywhere in that infinite space, absolute infinite space, you pick a point, is an arbitrary point. It can be anywhere. It can be inside the electron. It can be inside the sun. It can be the furthest distance ever that you can possibly imagine. Any point, you will see the flow of the force field. A unit that is coming to that point, arbitrary point, some will move past it. Others will be absorbed. Others will be swirling around it. When you do the bookkeeping like the 1,000 naira, it will satisfy this equation. That's the point. And therefore, absolute infinity is covered thoroughly well. Because there's no restriction as to the location of that arbitrary point.
Sorry, has your question been answered? Okay, ask it again.
Okay, what?
My question is that holistically, the 5 elements
Yes.
can be subsumed. You see, holistically,
What's the name
you see,
again?
the Gagut. My name is Dr. A.S. Ahmed from Chemical Engineering Department.
Okay.
Yes. I want you to expatiate on the time element.
Okay.
Holistically, we agree God is ever same, not changing, everlasting.
Yes.
But the smaller components of the universe, for instance, we agree that the earth, the believers believe that the earth will one day be disturbed by the relative motion in our position. So please, can you explain how this Gagut can be?
Yes, yes. Now you got to broaden your view. See, this is the absolute time in reality actually gives you a sense of the Almighty God. And that's basically what the believers deal with. But, you know, I want to caution us also to not become so scared, okay, about the hugeness of the Almighty God that you freeze. That doesn't do God any good. You want to get a sense as clear as possible of what the Almighty God is. You know that it's infinite. Okay? In fact, when you talk about infinite, which is kind of similar to what he was talking about, I'm sorry. But you see, this is a reference point here, okay? You say 1, 2, and so on down the number line, okay? Do you realize that between 0 and 1, that's, if you count the real numbers there, that's also infinite?
Yes.
Okay?
Larger infinite.
Absolutely. So that is infinite, this is infinite, this is infinite.
Number of points between 0, 1 is infinity 2.
Absolutely, absolutely. So you can get that kind of thing. But when you reduce it to space, and now you're talking about an arbitrary space, you've covered everything. There's no space that's left out. Because you didn't say, oh yeah, it's got to be within the solar system. No, that is not stated. So there's no point that is left out. Okay? That's what makes it cover. Yes, sir.
Yeah, Prof, just 1 minute. It's a big question. Space is, as mathematics does it, subject to certain axioms.
Yeah.
It is not conceiving everything.
Yeah.
It's impossible.
No. What do you mean by axiom?
Axioms are human constructs.
Yes.
It cannot be absolute. Therefore, after 2000 years, geometry has changed to Riemann. Euclid has gone in that sense, but Euclid remains as absolute geometry or real geometry, whatever it is.
Okay, so
Axioms change.
yeah, well, see, but the axioms are human stuff.
Yes.
Yes, okay, but what we're saying here is beyond the human stuff. You're picking up, yes, it's beyond, way beyond the human stuff, because you look, you know what the space is. This room is a space, it's a subset, okay? Now, just imagine yourself, okay? You know where the sun is, for example. You know where the solar system center is located. You know the furthest galaxy. Try to imagine. Get your imagination right there and beyond.
These are intuitions.
Sorry.
Yes.
Mathematics is afterwards.
Yeah.
Okay?
Yeah.
So that is the point that we're talking about. Okay, let me deal with the personal one. Now,
Your name?
Dr. Ahmed. Okay, now, This is also, see, this space here, mathematicians have no problem saying that this goes to infinity. Okay? They have no problem. All right. we have to deal with the realities that something that we can't count, we can imagine. See, the human mind, in other words, Einstein was in error right away when he says the speed of light is the limit, because the speed at which the human mind processes things is much faster than the speed of light. And therefore, if you think God's process to be even much bigger than that, then we're talking about the speed of light being a midget speed, okay? it's a snail speed, if you will, okay? So that's the kind of thing we're talking about. But you see, if the space in geometry can be imagined to be infinite, okay, and all the complications, we're talking about one that's unqualified here. Therefore, time, what is time? And that's one thing Stephen Hawking did, a short history of time. It's more like a long history of space. A long history of space. Time is space. What is time? Time is a reference point in space. That's what time is. That's what time is. If you didn't have a reference point, you can't measure anything in reality. You can certainly not measure space. When you say Kaduna is 40 or something miles, you have a reference point. You have a reference point. Which is why Albert Einstein emphasized the concept of relativity. It's relative. See, when you draw this geometry, okay, this reference here, you pick up this zero here. It gives you a bearing for you to now look at what you're talking about. Time gives the essence of that. Time, in other words, but it's independent. It's an independent variable in that respect, okay? Because the reference point can be chosen arbitrarily, okay? You choose the reference point arbitrarily. You want to measure Kaduna from here, you say it here, okay? All right, once you fix that, you now can say Kaduna is so much miles. But there's zillions of points where you can make that measurement. You see? So what time does is like gives you a reference point in your location of the geometry or the reference point. That's basically what time does. You got to remember, our time. We said that whether it does this, okay? Which is where we get the night and day. You know, if only what we're saying was night or day, time will not have the kind of dramatic impact that it has on us. But what are we talking about? We're talking about this. The oscillation or the rotation. That's what we call time is. We divide this into components. We divide it into 24, and we call one of those an hour. It is this space that we divide it.
Yes, thank you.
Please, somebody has the microphone.
Yes.
Go on.
It's me.
Yes, sir.
Please, let's get back to your equation there, the eta n. Etas of n, the whole equation of the etas of n. Not the whole of the life equation there. Maybe you have to clean all of those.
Okay. The etas of n, right? Is that one?
Yes.
Okay. Now, the reason I put a dot is
I'm sorry, my name is Dr. Tijani. I'm a mathematician, functional analyst.
okay.
quantum statistical mechanics, a follower of Hawkins, whom I met many times at Cambridge. Cambridge is my second home.
Okay.
Finished from Imperial College.
Okay.
Graduate of Imperial College, London. So,
okay.
My question here is what is that n? What are the values of your n? What are the ranges of your n?
Did Professor Hawkins send you on this?
This is just the beginning. We will gradually go to what I really want to say.
Well,
just let's know what the n is first.
Mathematical n is a parameter. It's a parameter that describes the differences in the characteristics of the solution of the equations. That's what n stands for. If you pick a value, describe a particular class of characteristics of the solution.
So suppose we pick n to be minus infinity.
Okay.
What does that mean?
Okay, you have n equal to minus infinity. Okay, what does that mean?
Yeah.
Well, the same thing that your infinity means on the number line. Oh, this one. What does that mean when you go to minus infinity?
No, but in the equation, can you fit in the minus infinity and then describe something physically? We are now talking of quantum mechanics now.
Well, see,
if n is infinity, then what is n plus 1? Tn plus 1 you have.
Yeah, that's it. That's what
No. Okay, well,
we are coming from mathematical
No,
background.
fine, that's all right. But you see, I want you to tell me what minus infinity is here on this number line.
What the minus infinity is saying that on the left of 0,
Yes.
wherever you pick a point,
Yes.
there's something beyond that. That's what it's saying.
Okay.
That's all.
That's exactly what this is saying too.
Sorry, I cannot see from the equation. That's what I'm trying to say. Because you see, the problem here is that your g's, your t's, and x and y's explain something there.
Yes.
Now, those apart from functional analysis, we want to know, because whether you are talking of variables, operators, if you are talking of variables, are they random?
Yes.
Not random, operators, bounded, unbounded, linear, non-linear. You see, all these things are very important in those equations. Now, and then those equations, you must have made some assumptions. Now, are those assumptions? Yes.
The n is from your number line. So, since that's accepted, n is automatically accepted. Now, it may turn out that when you actually do the analysis in terms of when you're looking at the limit of as n approaches infinity, plus it's an open, it's this kind of, we're talking about, say, n is this, not that. Okay? I didn't say that per se. It's this. Okay? Minus infinity to plus infinity, which is consistent with this here. So in that case, in as much as you agree with this, you agree with them on that basis. Now, it may turn out that when you draw the geometry, you might be reaching some kind of limited situation. That's limited.
It's limited.
No.
Because then you have to take the n, including that's what I want to say.
But excuse me, I didn't say that, that automatically is real. I didn't say that it's limited. I didn't say that. I said if you take a limit, okay, a limit of this as n approaches infinity, you might get something, okay? Yeah. But that is already done within your, within the number line, okay? You do that. What about when x approaches infinity? So that is not introducing anything new in that respect. But the generality of this equation is the fact that the point in the large space that you call the universe is arbitrary. That is the bottom line. That means it can be anywhere, including inside you, including inside your mind, including the farthest star. There's nothing that excludes any of that point.
Correct. I get it. But what I'm saying is those who are x, t's, and g's
are
either operators or variables. They explain something and you base on assumption because there must be some underlying assumptions.
No. Okay.
What are those assumptions?
Wait.
You see, these are very important crucial points there. We want to know the behavior of your G's and T's as operators, bounded, unbounded, linear, non-linear, random variable. These are very important factors arriving at those so that we know. Because you are n, as you are now saying, you are n, this small n must include minus and plus, so that minus infinity will be less than or equal to n, and n must be less than or equal to plus.
Yes.
Then there we don't have problem there.
Okay,
that one is clear. Now we come back to the variables that are in there in the theta sub n.
Yes.
These are the questions.
Yes. The variables, according to relativity, are time, x, Okay, the Minkowski's variable.
Yeah.
Now,
Ladies and gentlemen.
Just 1 second.
Yes, no, I'll give you 1 second. I'm just trying to make an announcement.
Sir, point is the dimensionless.
Huh?
And with this dimensionless,
No, he's not going anywhere.
you are talking. Space is very large.
Please ask your questions or make your questions.
I didn't hear the last part of your question.
Point is dimensionless. With this,
Switch it on.
It's on.
point is dimensionless. With this notion, how you can say this space is large? And second thing, first thing is this one. Second thing is, you talking about reference point. Point is also dimensionless.
Yes.
Without this notion, with this notion, how can you measure the position of any point particle in a space?
All right. Let me address the dimension part. You can see this quantity here can be any dimension that you want it to be.
Leave it for after we will discuss.
Yes, this quantity can be any dimensions. If you take this to be seconds, you can adjust this to be any other thing. So it unifies the dimensions. Okay? Now, but what we're talking about, you don't need dimension to say this point here. You don't need dimensions for that. Dimension is arbitrary, something that people set up for convenience. That's what dimension is. So therefore, but when we talk about the point, we know what we're talking about. We don't need to put, yes, but we don't talk about units when we talk about point. Point is a location. You are there, and of course, we know that point has a problem in terms of, being and limiting and all the other stuff, but we're talking about a location within geometry. If you draw this here, you can say this here without talking about dimensions. Okay? Yes? And if you put, okay, well, see, when you come to practical point, you know what the practical point comes in? It comes in the material part. Okay? Then we can deal with that on a separate point. The guy that has proven that the material thing is a function of the space. That is, very clear from the concept of matter. What is matter? Something that explains that occupies space. That's what we're talking about.
Ladies and gentlemen, this can take place. The professor will be available to continue to interact with you on these issues. He may not satisfy you, but at least have some interaction. So, Professor Oyibo, we thank you very much for your time.
Part of it, which Max Born introduced. Is it still valid, the uncertainty principle?
No, there's no such a thing as an uncertainty. What appears like uncertainty is our inability to
I'm Dr. S.K. Musa, the Director of University Health Services, Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. I am very much impressed, and I have gotten good knowledge, now so far so good, on what I am aware of about atom, about the miracles in atom, and the whole concept now has brought light into the subject matter. He had produced mother of all equations that explain most of the theories in various dimensions. So to me it's very enlightening, and I think he should be given optimal support towards his ambition about the Nobel Prize. Africa, all Africans should put hands together to see that this mission is achieved. That's my sincere opinion in this issue.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
What about you? Can you identify yourself and give us your opinion of
Okay,
what
my name is Dr. P.F. Taylor. I'm Associate Professor of Electrical Engineering and at the moment ICT Coordinator of the university. I was very impressed with Dr. Oyibo's lecture. And in fact, I think he was robbed of the Nobel Prize. So his lectures should be supported, and we should pressurize for him to be given a Nobel Prize that is merited. So what his theory is well-founded and is based on facts that maybe Einstein wasn't able to realize. So I wish him all the best.
Thank you very much. Can you first identify yourself for me?
I am Adejo Ruben, Department of Political Science, Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria.
Yeah. And what impact did Professor's lecture make on you? How would you assess it?
It's wonderful, and the idea is very unique, and he has tried over time. I feel he should be encouraged. He should be encouraged, and he should be given a Nobel Prize.
Oh,
my name is Mohammed Abakar Gulma, Faculty of Engineering, Ahmadu Bello University, Zaria. And this is Barrister Ogu, the Faculty Officer, ABU Zaria.
Yes.
He's
the Dean of Engineering.
And how has this lecture impacted you? Please don't go, give me a minute. How has this lecture impacted upon you?
No, I think that this coming has widened the horizon of the university and the faculty. You can see from today's interaction, there's a lot of interest. And how you know a lecture is interesting, it depends on the response. Almost everybody, including myself, wanted to ask a question. But the time just wasn't sufficient and it wasn't adequate.
Let me ask you this question. What does the formulation of the unified field theory propose to Africa if in fact this equation is valid?
Wow.
What would it mean to Africa?
What it means to Africa?
Yeah. In terms
it is a big achievement for Africans because it came from an African. It's now going to motivate the scientists in the Africa to wake up if they are sleeping, to do researches, to be first-class scientists in Africa, in the world.
Yes,
yeah.
Go ahead.
In the world? Yes. It's only now, before now, the Africans have this kind of inferiority complex that whatever good they do may not be heard from the other side of the world. But now this theory has brought us a goodie, a confidence that we Africans can achieve what the white man has achieved. And we can now wake up and do a first-class research and be equal to any white man in the world. Yes. Yes.
Thank you. Your comment so far as to the impact that this session has had on you. Identify yourself.
What is your name?
I'm Professor Sam Adefila. Professor of Petroleum Technology Development Fund in Chemical Engineering here in the university. I've been a lecturer here for about 32 years or so in chemical engineering. right now, for me, I'm looking at thermodynamics, and I see thermodynamics as the mother of all other courses in chemical engineering. So I'm looking at that now to try to see how I can formulate equations which I can use, which I can apply universally. So that's, you could see how this kind of concept, this universality or universalization of things in one area, is so useful to some of us. That concept is the concept that we want. I'll use it in my own way. I think you understand me. That's what I think I am as a professor. I should be able to use any concept anywhere. That's it. It's been really wonderful, and it will take. This thing will continue to digest it for a long time. I hope you know. It's not the end of it. In your sleep, think about it, rethink. But definitely, it's going to influence the way many of us do the things we do. I can't. If we sit down here, it will take us 2-3 days, for me to be able to tell you everything that is in my mind. I can give you examples of some things which I've been doing in a particular way, which I've confirmed with what he has given here. So it's really been very wonderful, honestly. Yeah, very, very wonderful. Yeah. And this is the kind of thing we really should be doing here. This, the depth or the highest point, of academics to me. To me. Absolutely.
Impact from the younger generation point of view had to be from Kogi State University. Yes, where the young people, we had a crowd audience that was in the neighborhood of over 6,000 people. The big hall was filled up. People, this is not counting the people from outside, because there were people outside looking through the windows. And people were hanging up on the ceilings and so on and so forth. And you have some of the clips, footage of that episode as a testimony. So there was a large crowd. But surprisingly, in spite of their age being young, they grasped quite a bit of it, as was indicated by your interview of those youngsters, after the lecture. And it did indicate that they have quite some solid understanding of what was presented to them, which is again part of the godliness, because something that was expected to be so sophisticated and so difficult turned out to be something people can assimilate, especially young ones. That was quite refreshing in terms of that experience. So Kogi was awesome. And of course, moving on to my home.
Let me ask you a little bit more about that.
Yes.
When you were up looking out at that crowd,
right,
thousands and thousands of men who were coming here lecturing on mathematics, how did that impact? What did you think? What did that mean in relationship? Because you couldn't get that many students here in America who come out for 4 hours, quiet, absorbing, involved. What did that mean?
It basically talks to the godliness that I mentioned before. And giving anyone, any group of people, giving a proper space to think about that would react like the youngsters reacted. But theirs were heightened up by the fact that since I was here in America, and all they heard was, from a distance, but they heard things that to them before Gagut sounded too good to be true. So they really wanted to come and check it out themselves. And then when they came and checked it out and found it to be godly in terms of being truthful, it amazed them. And in fact, what was fascinating to me was the fact that they were quiet. They were actually quiet. I mean, it was very touching to me. It really touched me. And what I got through that touching is the fact that God is so powerful, and God can touch a lot of people, and God means to touch the world through Gagut. Because of the revelations that are in Gagut are so godly that anyone that sits down and is able to absorb it is going to be touched. And that's what happened to those youngsters. And when you interview them later on, you begin to hear what they were saying. Some were so overwhelmed they couldn't even talk. They would just say a few words and say, well, you just too much is overwhelming. But they gave praise to the Almighty God. And that's what time it is, because God has chosen people, after all the sufferings, for 500 years. You might call it the light at the end of the tunnel of suffering. Okay, it's what Gagut can be said to have represented for the black race. Because nobody anticipated that this discovery would come from the ghetto or from the black people or anywhere. But of course, what do they know? God is in charge. And that's one thing that Gagut has said. That God is in charge, which is why we name it God Almighty's Grand Unified Theorem. Theorem means truth that could be proven mathematically. So that particular piece was demonstrated at that Kogi State University, where there was a large numbers, thousands of youngsters coming together, dropping everything else they were doing to be present and listen to what is supposed to be the most sophisticated mathematics research ever done. The most sophisticated research ever done, period. Where they were not expecting to, as a result, understand. But by an act of God, they did pick up part of that. Enough to touch them, to become overwhelmed, some of them.
Let me ask you, because I felt and saw in your trip that you came to announce to the black man, to the African world, that the black man was free. Can you elaborate on that?
Yes. Well, it is actually more than freedom. It is what you call freedom. Being free because God needs you to do something which is to lead the world. Liberation through leadership.
Kemetic people. While we were taught Kemetic people, we created a subject called chemistry. You never seen that subject written that way before. You always have C here. It's 2 words created by the Europeans. They point this word up. Chem and mystery. Chem, dictionary definition of chem is black, as in black people. And of course, mystery is mystery. This was coined in Europe. The Arabs call it al-chem. Again, the key word is chem. Arab translates this as the art of the ancient Africans. Now, why was it called the mystery of the ancient Africans? Because of black magic. That's where you got the term black magic from. Okay? The most sophisticated magic is called black magic. Because if you give the ancient African a piece of scrap like this, they will turn it into gold. They would take a piece of thing from the floor, they change it into gold. And so the Arabs were fascinated. They took the story to Europe. And of course, the Europeans were flabbergasted. They want to know that science. To the point where people like Newton were alchemists. Newton got his inspiration through studying alchemy. And alchemy at that point was such a unified subject that it was taught to people.
What I'm talking about tonight is not only the missing pages of African history, but some of the missing pages of the history of the world. After the decline of the Roman Empire forced by the rise of Islam, pushing of the Europeans out of North Africa and the Mediterranean. More than 1,000 years of history got neglected from the history of the world. When African genius in state building began to decline in the Nile Valley, African genius in state building was reborn in the Niger River. And another great river civilization was born. This great river civilization have been left out of history. Entire history books, even history of Africa, has been written with this great river civilization left out. Left out because people are stupid enough to call this Black Africa. Never use the word Black Africa, not because Africans are not black. Black is an honorable word. There's nothing basically wrong with it. But because it presupposes that there is a legitimate white Africa. There is no legitimate white Africa. And so somebody says Black Africa, ask them, what other kind of Africa legitimately is there? You never say white Europe, and you never say wet rain. What other kind of rain is there other than wet rain? That's redundant.
As we were thrown out of our regular abode in Kemet, otherwise called Egypt, we moved in those directions and settled in Nigeria. Okay? We will move on to the New World and so on and so forth later on. But we settled there and, you know, brought whatever we could bring from Egypt, which is mostly the culture. The Arabs that threw us out did not allow us to carry our pyramids or the skills for building those pyramids because we didn't know how long we were going to stay in the new place. So we didn't start immediately building pyramids. Our buildings, though, was, you know, when we started, basically a reflection of the pyramids. Okay? The so-called thatched roof buildings are very much like the pyramids. Okay? You know, some of them are round. If you remember in Makurdi area, you saw some round, the other people call it herds and so on, which is very much like the pyramid. The term Igala people was the name that was picked up when we were fleeing from the Arabs, from Egypt. And Gala would turn out to be a translation of, which means time of trouble. That's the meaning in many African languages, time of trouble.
When you look at the genius of Africa, that genius, once it declines in one place, is reborn in another place. And when you look at the continents of the world, and look at the people in the world, nearly all civilizations are born near great rivers. When you look at Africa, and you look at the civilizations of Africa, first the civilization of the Nile River, then the Niger River, then the Volta River, then the Congo River, then again on the east is the Limpopo and the Zambezi River. You go to China, China is the Yangtze River. Go to Europe, it is the Danube River and the Volta River. Go to England, it is the Thames River. Every time you go to a continent and look at and look for the beginning of a civilization and the beginning of a great city and a commerce, you find the river and the city on the river. Now we are examining a great civilization in Africa that had its birth after Egypt. To some extent, it is as old as Egypt, but it came to the attention of the world after Egypt. And to some extent, it benefited from the aftermath of Egypt. This is Nile Valley civilization that had its birth and flourished after Egypt. It is also a civilization whose people benefited from a river civilization that flourished in the green Sahara before it became a desert.
The ancient Africans called Kemetic were thrown out of Kemet by the conquering Arabs. And as they spread out in all directions, they called themselves something like Gawa people. That's right, they call themselves Gawa people. The current population of Ethiopia, 75% of themselves call themselves Gawa people. Okay? In Nigeria, they are actually, in Angola, is the land of the Gawa people. Okay? Nigeria, of course, has the Gawas. This is Gala. The two Ghana republics are nothing but an expression of Gawa. The language of the Congolese is called Lingala. In Sierra Leone, the people call themselves Gawas. In the New World, there's something called the Gawa. The Gawas and the Gitches, even in the New World, that's in America. This individual that is sitting this way with a camera is a Gawa person from America. Not a white man. Now, the Jupans translate the word Gawa to be something like disagreement, something like that. Disagreement. That's what the Jupans translate the word. They have the vocabulary. Gawa, they have it in their vocabulary. And it's translated means disagreement, which was the disagreement you had with the Arabs in Kemet. That's where the word came from. Today, the African is re-embracing the religions that Africans created. Except now, the language is somewhat foreign, which causes a detachment from you and your creator. I'm going to challenge a person who can write Hausa and read Hausa with the term Ubangiji. I want somebody to translate the word Ubangiji for me.
To my understanding, there are two translations of the word Ubangiji. In every Hausa and in everyday Hausa, Ubangiji is the creator. But Gigi, if you dissociate the word, Gigi is the home.
Yes.
And Uba yes, is the father of the house. But in everyday usage, yes, Ubangiji is the creator.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. That's what I wanted to know. Now, I have another question. How old do you think that word is relative to the word Allah in African setting? Which one was heard first in the African setting? Is it Ubangiji or Allah?
It's very difficult, so I need help.
Now, is anybody that writes Yoruba here and can read Yoruba? I want you to translate for me the word Oloduma.
It's a sentence. Olu Odumare. Olu is the head. Olu is the head.
Okay.
Odumare. Odu is something which is something you don't know. Odu. You really don't have a word for it.
Okay.
It's too big. It's something.
Thank you. It's too big.
Yeah.
Big. All right.
Then marry.
Okay. All right. Got it. Now, is anybody here that speaks Igbo or writes Igbo? Now, Chineke or Chi-Uku, what does that mean?
Chineke. That is God who creates, the creator. Then Chukwu is a big God.
Thank you.
Chi is God.
Thank you.
Uku is big.
All right. Now, let me. You're a young man. How do you think, in terms of relative timing, which one do you think the African knew first? The Chukwu or Chineke or Jesus Christ?
Yeah, as much as I know, and I believe my fathers knew, God was before.
That is Jim. Thank you. And would you say the same thing with Oloduma?
Yeah.
Well, the case is already made. The case is already made. And you see, this is not a trivial point. Because your relationship with the Almighty God that we've now proven to be real is a direct relationship. When God created you, it was a direct between you and your God. It's like you and your mother. You don't try to go through another woman to reach your mother. That is what it is like. That has so many dangerous things associated with it. Number one, it keeps you detached. Number two, it dilutes the relationship. Number three, it's just not right. Because when you say Allah or Jesus or all that, you have to go back again and translate it into the Olodumare or Ubangiji or Chineke before you actually comprehend it. And that is the danger of the state of inferiority complex. And that is what God sent this to bust, so that the world can actually relate directly with your Almighty God and put the human intermediaries in their proper place. Because God is so mighty, He's so big, He's so huge, that the attempt to personalize God is a disservice. But it has a good thing in terms of getting you to relate to God easy, in terms of a father figure. But the fact that it's put in that term so you can understand it should not in any way minimize the infinite nature of the Almighty God. God is so infinite that God cannot be contained in a boundary. This is what I am, is a boundary. I am limited in every which way. My thinking, what I can do, and my abilities, I'm limited. God does not have such a thing at all. And that's why God is called the Almighty God.
History in Africa that developed before the Christian era, and I was trying to deal with pre-God religions and pre-God spiritual. When I say pre-God religions, and I am not talking about an age of godlessness, and I'm not talking about an age of sinfulness and an age of degradation. This was one of the greatest ages of spirituality known in the history of the world. It was probably one of the highest moral ages known to man. And man did not use the word God at all. And I'm not talking about a godless age. I am talking about an age when man accepted a spiritual force of the universe so all-conclusive that it included everything. And man did not say only man has a soul. He said all living things has a soul, including the cockroach. And he wouldn't step on a cockroach because a cockroach has a soul. And he wouldn't cut down a tree without a ceremony because a tree has life and a tree has a soul. Western man began the stupid concept that only human beings have soul. Western man, in his soullessness, began the concept that only certain people with certain faces and certain color has soul. Western man is the only one that began to make a virtue out of a physical defect, the lack of color. To make you feel ashamed out of the great virtue of having color. And you do not understand to this day the envy that people have of you because you have color. You are the most beautiful people on camera or walking down the street that God ever created. And this form of spirituality included everything, and included a law, the law of opposites, which to simplify it was the law of complementary, that you complemented everything, that if you had a female, you got to have a male or vice versa. And so you did not ever get into the stupidity of debating the equality of man and woman, because if you couldn't have one without the other. And so Africans never would debate the equality of a man and a woman, because it is almost asking whether your mother was your equal, and how would you debate anything as stupid as that? Because if it wasn't for your mother, you wouldn't be here.
The way the society was run was done on such a high mental level that crime was not something that you expected. There's not a whole lot of it. There were not too many killings to warrant a jail. There were not too much stealing to warrant a jail, which is why we lost, one of the reasons why we lost that war 500 years ago. Because that's not our style of doing business. Everybody took pride in their the talents that God gave them, they were able to sustain themselves. So they didn't need to steal from other people.
See, that's why people came and envied our gold. This is what I keep repeating, that we have always been the world's richest people, rich in culture, rich in material, and rich in spirit. This is why we didn't build no great churches and cathedrals. We didn't have to build churches and cathedrals. All life was our cathedral. We celebrated everything, and we respected life so much, we didn't even step on a cockroach. All living things are part of the celebration of life. A tree was part of our holiness. So we created spirituality. And the spirituality began to challenge when other people came along and created religion and began to commercialize on it. And what we have to get back, and what has saved us as a people, is our spirituality. See, when people created religions, they put it in a container. And they put some restrictive rules around it, but we were obeying these rules all along. We never said, I'm my brother's keeper. We just kept him. We didn't say that, brother's died, I got to make sure that his wife is dead. We just did it. And it wasn't a Sunday go to meeting thing, it was an all-day thing. And see, it was the spirituality of this of that society that maintained it, but maintained it all of the time. And this is what the foreigners didn't understand. And this what
not only is this a commonality for the believers and non-believers, certainly the Muslims and Christians definitely believe in this God here. Together, it's the same God that they all believe in. If that is the case, then why are they slaughtering themselves? Can you find any logic behind that? Now, Gagut has come to end all that bloodshed. That's why God sent Gagut. Another person believes in God, you're supposed to love that person, irrespective of their little problems. Because frankly, as easy as it is to slaughter another brother or another sister, how about recreating that brother or another sister? Did you ever try to recreate that brother or sister?
It's not possible.
That's right. Then if it's impossible, why in the world are you doing it? You must go through a reversible process. You can do something that you think you can undo, but if you can't undo something, don't get quick. That's definitely not a credit to Almighty God. Again, that's within Gagut. I want to point out that very, very clear. Okay? From now on, there's not going to be any bloodshed anymore. Because now you have no excuse. This is the deal here. This is the most important thing in everything. Gagut would find out for you every truth. Everything that is true that is in the holy books is in here. God is the mover and the shaker.
One of the things that we got from Egypt also is Ifa, the Ifa oracle and all that. Was something we did, and you can see that because the language still reminds us of the language we had in Egypt, which the Arabs absorbed into their own language. It wasn't, it sounds today you think that's Arabic. No, it's not. Iredafili, my brother, older brother knows the language, and he can do the divination with the Ifa. That came directly from our Egypt days, and that is tied to the masquerade. The masquerade, like it says, mask, you're masking yourself. in that mode, you're supposed to be representing the spirit. Okay, a spirit who takes on another dimension and is able to do things without disclosing their worldly, their earth identity at this point. You can do all kinds of things. You dance, for example, entertain people. You could even do divination. Okay, in the terms of it's a whole science in itself. It's not just there. See, people trivialize it by putting on some mask and funny face or mask and all that and funny. No, it's a lot more than that. It's a whole entity in itself. You know, it's a whole science in itself. Okay, because you train for it. You know, the part of your training, you learn how to dance. It's like going to a divinity school. To become, you know, involved in the masculine, it's like a divinity school. You go and you learn the art and the science and what it takes and so on and so forth. And you learn your skills. So it's an extension of the human dimension. Yes, that's absolutely correct. Because, for example, like I said, it helped the maturity process, what they call rites of passage. You go through that. The masquerade usually is part of that process. Once they deem you qualified and you reach the age, what they will do is actually bring you into the masquerade situation and be shown, you know, the process. Because you're not supposed to go out and reveal what you see. You're going to train as an officer, as a priest, you know, as an expert in the area. You got to train, and it's part and parcel of the religion because the masquerade comes from the, you know, it's associated with the shrine usually, where worshiping is done. It's a religious process, in other words. It's not something to be, you know, disrespected at all. It's a very, you know, even though there's an entertainment component, the main purpose is not just for entertainment. It's a whole religious process. God is not really human. So for you to be a priest, really, you have to take on certain characteristics. You have to be brilliant enough to say you're going to be presenting God to people. The masking can come in that mode at some point, sometimes, in some cases, okay? You know, so it is a religious affair more than anything else. It turns out that, you know, the worshiping process, you know, brings into it the, you know, the entertainment, the dancing. The dancing is not really entertainment. It's actually, you know, it's a mode where you actually concentrate in the most uninhibited way. So, in the communication with the Almighty God. Such a point, even during our captivity, we were not afraid of anybody, any other human. We could tell the truth at that point, just for that moment. And so, and that is exhibited by the black folks over here. You see, that's the extension of the masquerade. They were not allowed to. Although, yeah, during the Mardi Gras and all that, there were a little bit of those that were played, okay? But it's a religious process. A very serious religious process. You take on that mode because you want to extend your dimension. So you can actually, you know, do a lot of things that you're not expected to do in the current dimension that you are in. The palace, for example, has 9 categories, 9 different masquerades. And it takes a big